Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's video, let's create a toy spaceship, maybe a sci-fi jet game asset. So it's going to be a game asset, but I'm not going to take it as far as doing UVs and materials or textures. I'm only going to focus on 3D techniques or 3D modeling here in Autodesk Maya. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to display grid, and let's make sure that our scale is about the same size. So I'm going to reset mine. It's 12 by 5, right? So we can follow sort of the same numbers. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my box and drag a box on my grid. And the reason I'm dragging it and mine didn't just simply appear is because under create polygon primitives, I have interactive creation on, which means I have to drag my shapes, and that's something that I like to do when I model, right? Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my wireframe. I'm going to select my mesh, go to mesh, do a smooth, and you can see in the attribute editor that my exponential method is on, and I'm going to set my division levels to 3 for the body of the jet. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the object mode, select my shape, and in the channel box I'm going to zero out the X to make sure that it's in the center so I can use my symmetry. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is let's make this body of the plane just a little bit larger, and let's go ahead and go into our face mode, and let's just simply select a few of these. Let's select something like this area here on the side. So it's not on top, right? Because I want my cockpit of the plane to be in the front. So I'm going to select this 4x4 grid. Next, I'm going to make sure my symmetry is on, and I'm going to click on this button here called Circularize. Alright, so then if you take a look, you can see that when you do use the Circularize, it completely destroys the symmetry, right? You can see that the topology lines are now all over the place. This one is pointing left, this one is pointing right, and we do want to maintain our symmetry for this. So what we want to do is in this little box that comes up when you click on Circularize, make sure that you click on evenly distribute on off, and if you say off, you can see what that's doing. It's adjusting the topology, right, and maintaining the symmetry. So for this, model, I want that off, right? And what I'm going to do next is click on. Let's go ahead and jump out of symmetry and click on Extrude, and then I'm going to click on Scale and just scale this in. So now I have kind of a nice thick border for my cockpit. I'm going to click Extrude again and just pull these all the way in. And if I click on this little blue icon that's hovering here, I can click on that, and that's going to center my gizmo, right? Which means I can now pull this in and maintain a nice even scale as it's doing it. All right, so I'm going to go with something like this. I'm going to press delete because those faces are not going to be seen. So let's go ahead and go to object mode, take a look. So now we're left with something like this. All right, so this is going to be sort of the body of the plane. Now let's create the cockpit area. So for that, I'm going to do repeat. I'm going to grab my box, drag my box on my grid, do mesh smooth. I'm going to make sure my translate is at 0. And I'm just going to simply go into object mode, select my mesh, and grab my transform and just place it into position, and of course scale it. So I'm going to position it somewhere in this area, and what I'm doing is I'm maintaining this lip, this spacing between the sphere and the border, right? So if you do the same, that's going to create a really cool effect. When you select both of these shapes and press 3, you can see how it's kind of puffing this up, and I kind of like that effect. Now there are extra faces on here that we don't need. So let's press 1. Let's grab our rotation tool and let's just rotate this to face the top. And I'm watching this bottom edge right here, so it kind of goes all the way around, right? Now if I go into isolate, I know that all of these faces down here are not being seen. So I'm going to press delete, double click on that, press delete, go jump out of the isolate mode, and I'm going to select both of these and do a combine and do clear history. So you can see in my outliner I'm just left with one shape. I'm going to select this shape and press 3, and that's going to give me sort of the base foundation for my jet. The next thing I would like to do is I'm going to press spacebar, go into this quad view, do Shift A to frame all the all the viewports. Go into the side view, and let's go ahead and go into face mode. Let's select this entire back area. Press B on our keyboard to turn on soft select, and if you double click on your tools here, tool settings will come up, and then the soft select you can control this little dial, right? So fall off radius. So let's set it to something like 2. Grab our scale tool, and let's just do something like this, where this is going to be the back of the jet. I'm going to move it back to maybe give me a little more room for the wings. Alright, so let's do something like that, and let's also create the shape that we want for our jet to look like. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into my perspective view. I'm going to select my mesh, and under modeling I'm going to go to deform, and let's click on lattice options, and here let's set the divisions to 3 by 3 by 3 and say apply. And that's going to give us this cool box that we can use to kind of shape our jet into any form that we want while maintaining symmetry, and at the same time making sure our shape is not going to get super wobbly or deformed, right? So I'm going to go to my lattice points by right clicking, and let's just select, for example, let's select these front faces and just pull them out, and that's going to be the front of our jet. We can also grab our scale tool and just scale them down, and maybe that could be kind of the nose, so something like that. Let's grab these top ones and maybe pull them back a little. I want to make sure that we can create this nice kind of a ramp, or we can go down, it's up to you, but I kind of like that. I'm gonna go with, maybe it's like a little bit more of an organic shape, right, for my jet. Another thing I could do is, I definitely want this to be maybe a little bit wider. I'm gonna grab all of these points, grab my scale, and just scale this up a little. So it's almost like not a sports car, but kind of, kind of a flatter feel, right? Now it's just a matter of preference, but of course you can shape this as you like. You can make this maybe sharper if it's a jet. But let's say we are happy with something like this. We can adjust these as well. Alright, so maybe I'll bring this up just a little bit. So, very nice. Now I'm looking at it, it does feel a little bit short, so I'm going to pull this back just a little more. Alright, really cool. To kind of bake this new shape in, so without these modifiers, right, you can see them in the outliner, I'm going to select everything and just clear my history, and you can see that kind of cleans this up, and we're back at just initial one shape. Alright, very cool. Next, I'm going to also make sure you save your work, so do Control S. And now let's maybe create kind of wings for our jet. So for the wings, what I could do is, let's just grab something like a box, and you know what, maybe we don't need to see this right now, so I'm going to select this, go into my channel box, and under display, let's create a new layer and hide it. So we know it's here, but we don't need to see it. Now that's one way of doing it. Another easier way of doing it is just simply selecting it in your outliner and just pressing H to hide it as well. So essentially it's the same thing. The benefit of using layers versus just hiding it in your outliner is that you also have other options. So for example, I can do something like this where it's a template and there's like a rough reference of where my thing is, but I'm not able to select it. So, and then of course you have the R, which is the reference, meaning you can see it, but you can't select it. So that would be the difference between the two methods. But for this, let's just hide it, doesn't really matter. So next I need to create some kind of wings. I'm gonna grab a box, drag a box, and let's make sure that it's zeroed out on X. And let's just maybe shape it into what the wings would look like. So maybe something like this. I can go to my attribute box, attribute editor, and under Polycube, I can give myself more width. So maybe let's do something like 8. Okay. And another thing we could do, just to add something more interesting, we can bend this, but before we bend it, let's create maybe kind of a jets that are going to be, I'm going to press B on my keyboard, turn on my symmetry, and let's just select maybe this here. And you notice I'm not selecting the back, just these. And I'm going to do an extrude and just pull them out. So I have something like that. I think that's pretty cool. Let's select these end ones, do an extrude. Maybe let's pull this in. Do Control E to extrude again and pull this out. So these could be like the end of the wings. I think that would be interesting. Another thing we could do is maybe select this line here. Let's do a bevel, and we can pull it in just a little bit. Maybe to 0.1. We can add a segment in the middle. We can also double click to select it, grab our scale tool and just pull this in. Just add even more detail. Another thing we could do is let's just grab these guys here, do an extrude, do something like that, do another extrusion and maybe pull this in. And these could be like the front jets. And let's do the same thing in the back. I'm gonna grab all of these, extrude, do another extrude, and let's just pull them in and maybe scale them down a little bit. All right, so now I have something like this, and maybe these could be cool wings for our jet. If we want to do a little more, we could select these, press B on our keyboard. Let's grow our soft select to something like, let's grow it to like, I don't know, how about 8? Go to 8, grab my rotate tool and maybe rotate these a little bit. Grab my scale tool, scale this in, and maybe pull them back a little bit so it feels like more of a wing, right? All right, so we have this, that's great. Another thing we can do is let's select the entire thing, okay? And while everything is selected, it's still super low poly, right? It's only 130 faces. Let's go ahead and do a bevel. And let's increase our fraction so you have something along these lines. And the cool thing about this is now if I select it and press 3 on my keyboard, you can see that it's maintaining the shape a little bit better, which this is exactly what I want. So I'm gonna go back into 1 for a minute. And another thing I could do is let's go ahead and go to under modeling. Let's go into deform, non-linear. Let's do a bend. Let's grab this line, click rotate, hold down the J key and rotate this 90 degrees. In the attribute editor, let's go to bend and let's just curve this. So we can decide how we want this curved, but I think it would be neat if it's a sci-fi jet, you can decide how you like, but I'm thinking it would be really cool if it was like bend down a little bit. I think it's just a again, artistic preference, but let's say I like this. I'm gonna go with this. I can select all of this and clear my history to get rid of the bend line, right? I can create another bend and maybe bend it back. We could do that. Or for now, let's just fit this into with the body. So I'm gonna press 3 on my keyboard so I can see what it looks like. I'm gonna go back to my channel box and unhide the body of my plane. I'm gonna select the body and definitely scale this down. It's a little bit too large. And I kind of like how this is working or fitting, but the problem is these need to be spaced out a little more. So let's go into isolate mode. Let's grab maybe all of these and let's just pull them back just like that. Let's jump out of isolate mode and just decide what makes sense. So I think something like this is what I was looking for. All right, I think that's cool. Let's do Control S to save our work. Very nice. Another thing we can do is we can add a bunch of panels to this, right, to make it even more interesting. So maybe let's jump out of the self-select. Let's select this here, do an extrude, and let's do something like this, do another extrude. Let's pull this, decide if we want it up or down. I think I like it up. And how about we go down first, then we do another extrude, do something like that, then we do another extrude and pull this up, and maybe do something like this. All right. Now if I go to object mode, select this and press 3, you can see what that actually looks like. I think that's pretty interesting. Let's go back to 1 and let's maybe add something here as well. I'm gonna do extrude, do something like this, do another extrude, and maybe let's push this down. All right, let's take a look, press 3, you can see what that looks like. If you are not liking how that's looking, of course you can just add more edges. So if I double click on this and maybe select these inner edges also, let's go ahead and select all of these. Let's do a bevel, and we can change the fraction, and we can also add another segment inside if you really want to maintain that sharp edge. Right now, if you press 3, you can see that that lip is going to kind of maintain that sharpness. Very cool. When you render this, you can subdivide it and get rid of these kind of blocky looking topology, right? But I think you can also just leave it if you wanted to. You don't have to go into a smooth mode. You leave it like this, and then you have more of a kind of a square look. So it's it's up to you as far as the preference. If you do want to smooth this out, you just select it and go to mesh and do a smooth, and that's going to, you can see how quickly it's going to add more topology and give you beautiful clean subdivision for rendering, right? I don't yet want to make my model this complex yet. So let's say I'm happy with this. Another thing we could do is maybe let's add a couple things on the side, like up here, to make it a little more interesting. Do Control S to save your work. And let's select all of these and add them to our layer and then hide it. And now let's add like a rocket that we can put on top on maybe each side. So for that, I'm gonna grab my cylinder, drag it out. Let's make it a little longer. Make sure that we are zeroed out on X. Let's go to Attribute Editor and then go to Poly Cylinder, and let's turn on round caps. And let's turn up subdivision. So something like 7 I think is good. You can control what your scale looks like. I was going for something like this to add to the top of the plane. I kind of like this. Another thing we can do is maybe let's go ahead and delete. Holding down the Shift and period, you can grow your selection. Let's press delete, double click on this and press delete. And let's go ahead and close this hole. I'm going to select this, do extrude, and let's just pull these in. Press extrude again and pull this up. And let's go ahead and do extrude again and just kind of pull these guys in as well, right? And now to seal this whole together, we could just click on this button, merge to center, right? Very nice. Another thing we could do is maybe let's select these edges here and do a bevel. All right, almost looks like a bullet at this point, which gives me an idea. I think I would like to select, I would like to save one of these before we do more, to put it under the plane. So maybe the plane is carrying some kind of a weapon or bomb. So let's do that. So one more thing, let's select this edge here, do another bevel. Let's bring these lines together, add another segment inside there, double click on this, go to scale, and I'm going to jump out of the symmetry mode to reset my scale so I'm in the center and just pull this in. Alright, so I have something like this. Now if I go into object mode, select this and press 3, you can see what it looks like, and it's giving me this really nice shape, right? Very cool. Let's go ahead and save this and just move it aside. So I'm gonna press Ctrl D and move one aside so I have one kind of just sitting there. I'm gonna select this, go to my channel box, add another layer, and let's just hide that. So we have a little extra one, and we can even call this, if we wanted to, you know, extra. We'll use this in a minute. For now, I'm gonna unhide the plane, grab this. Let's move this up, hold, click rotate, hold down the J key, and just kind of put it in position. So 90 degrees. You can see that in the bottom left, what that looks like. Let's go ahead and maybe, let's make sure that it's centered. So I'm going to center my pivot and just scale this in. And maybe scale this even this way a little bit, because I want to make it look like it's kind of a like a side jet thing. We can jump into this view. Let's turn on our wireframe, and let's just position it kind of on the side. So something like that I think is cool. And maybe put it right here. And we can figure out how this fits into the plane, but so let's do this. Let's press 1 on our keyboard, and then let's select maybe these two guys here, do extrude, and let's do something like this, do another extrude. Let's pull this in. Let's click on the end, scale them in, extrude, and then pull this right in. And then let's click on the edge and just do something like this. Fuel tank, press 3 to see what that looks like. I think that looks really interesting. And I definitely want to have two of them. So I could maybe move it up a little bit so you could see that nice connection. Something like that. Let's select this here and do a mirror. So we have another one on the other side. So now we have two of them, right? Very nice. Control S to save your work. Another thing we can do is, let's clear our history so we don't have all this extra history. All right, so I'm gonna press 1 and then I'm gonna go to face mode. I'm gonna select this one. I'm going to select this, and let's do one here and one here, right? And I think that would be really cool if we just extrude it. And let's go ahead and scale this part in. Then let's do another extrude. So let's do something like this. We'll do another one. I purposely added extra edge in there so it's holding, so it would hold the shape a little bit better. All right, and then we can maybe let's pull these in like this, and we can also pull them in this way. All right, I think that's kind of fun. We can also decide if you want to angle these or leave them as is. I'm going to go to object mode, press 3, and you can see what that looks like. So if you have kind of these fun little side things for our little jet. All right, so let's do the back. So for the back, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this edge here, and let me just pull this edge out. So we have something like this. All right, then I can. All right, so then another thing I can do is also maybe let's do a bevel. So we have something like that. Very cool. Another thing I need to do is I'm going to select this entire ridge, grab my scale tool, and just make sure that it's nice and flat. So you can see how it's clean and round. And again, you can control how much of this you want out, right? So I'm kind of happy with this. And honestly, what I was envisioning is this entire back would be an emission. So I'm not really sure if I want to create more detail here, or I was just envisioning this entire panel being, you know, had like an emission, and then you have like a smoke or some kind of an energy coming out from this entire thing, and then back here, these two, right? So it's just again, a personal choice. So I'm not going to do anything else, but you're welcome to add more detail. I think that that works. All right. And let's see what else can we do. Oh yeah, let's bring that extra guy. Let's grab this thing here. Let's scale it. And just so it looks like it's not an exact clone of this, let's just maybe make it a little skinnier and smaller. And let's go ahead and hold down the J key. I'm gonna rotate this 90 degrees. I'm gonna put it into position. Maybe something along these lines. Maybe let's go ahead and jump into our front view, and let's just decide how we want to make this work. So maybe there's like 3 of them here, right? So let's do one like this. I'm gonna go back into perspective view and put it into place. Maybe it's peeking out a little bit, so something like that. Or I do want to make it feel a little more impressive, so maybe it's a little larger. All right, so that works. Another thing we can do, let's isolate it. You know, if you want to animate these or drop them, maybe you don't want to add anything else to here, so maybe actually it would be smarter to just simply grab, you know, something like a box, right? Like a little box, and just simply scale that in. Maybe grab the top of it, do something like this, and use this as sort of the holder, right? So this way, if you drop it, it would make sense. It wouldn't be a part of the mesh itself. So let's go ahead and put it into position. I'm going to select both of these and just do isolate. And I essentially just want to make sure that it's centered. So I think something along these lines works. We can of course also delete this guy and this bottom one as well, right? Because no one's gonna, well, actually, wait a minute. The bottom one we might need if we do end up animating and dropping the bomb. So let's leave that on actually. And let's just take this and this, grab our move tool, make sure you're in the world X orientation, and you can just move this down like this, right? Another thing we can do is let's jump back into our front view, and let's do this by selecting our this one, press Ctrl D, and let's just make a second one. So I'm trying to figure out if I want 3 or 2. I think 2 works, so I'm going to do this. And honestly, I'm not liking how this is looking because the wings are bent, so I think something like this makes more sense. Press Ctrl D to maybe make one here as well. And if we wanted to, let's press Ctrl D, make this one smaller. And maybe place one here, press R again, and just scale this in. Just So you have maybe a little one. Press W. Maybe there's one here. I'm gonna grab this guy. Press Ctrl D. Move it into position. Press R. Scale it down. Press W. And then move it into position. Press E to rotate. Something like that. And press W again to move it around. And let's go jump into our perspective view and just make sure that it makes sense, which it doesn't. So I'm going to select both of these, grab my move tool, and let's just move it into position. So something like that, I think, is pretty cool. I'm going to select, let's turn off our floor by turning off the grid. I'm going to grab this, and these as well by holding down the Shift key. For now, I can always separate them into pieces again, but for now, to flip them over, the easiest way is just to combine them. Let's clear our history, and then let's just flip them by clicking on our mirror tool. So now we can find them on both sides, right? Very cool. It feels like the bottom needs maybe something else. Straighten this out, right? So we can grab this edge and we can just straighten it out by using the scale. And then we can do the same thing up here. All right, and this is going to allow us to maybe do kind of a panel down here as well. So let's do extrude. Let's pull this in. And let's do one more. Do something like this. Do another extrude. Maybe pull this out. All right, just so you have something down there. It's a little more interesting. But go to press 3. And I'm gonna do one more. I'm just having too much fun. I'm gonna grab these, do extrude. Let's maybe pull them out and then pull them in. All right, just adding a little extra thickness, right? So press 3. All right, really cool. So you can keep going and add more and more detail. I'm just gonna do one more, last one. I'm gonna press 1. Let me grab this edge here. And let's go ahead and do a bevel with an extra segment. I'm gonna grab this segment, go to my scale tool, and just scale this in. Now if I press 3, you can see what that looks like. Well, I think this concludes our video. I hope you had a lot of fun. You learned something new. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.